Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Chewing the Fat. It's been a long time since I've done one with Mr. Dean Kilby. Thanks for joining me, Dean. Sorry?
Pleasure. It's been forever. I never see you anymore. We never talk.
Rubbish, you see me all the time. Sorry, the
Oh, you're too busy with all those fat people.
other. Yeah, so I thought after your chat with Emma and Emily also, I thought it'd be a good idea for, I just felt like I was missing out and, being
Jealousy.
behind,
Yeah.
just FOMO, we call it. But it was a good event we had the other night with the team, the Untangling Metabolic Health. It
It
was
was amazing. Congratulations. Thanks to you guys for pulling it all together.
yeah, for everyone, for your support as well, and Emma for getting up and under it. And it was her idea basically. So we're going to look to do some more of those. Everyone was really happy with it and gained a lot from it. So yeah, it was a great night.
Yeah. Well, we recorded it, so we'll make some of those recordings available, so people will be able to gain access to that soon enough. We'll let everyone know when. But the night itself was amazing. We had some awesome speakers. The venue, Laporte Space, was just incredible. The speakers, Dr. Maria Mackey, integrative medical doctor, talked about hormones and metabolic health, and then I talked about the simpler health protocol and how to reverse metabolic syndrome and why it's important and the foundations of health, in particular metabolic health, gut health, and cognitive health. And then we had Dr. Siba Dole from the Center for Digestive Diseases, and he talked in depth about the gut microbiome, which is just fascinating. That was brilliant, that talk. And then also Dr. Kevin Boundy, a sports medicine physician, and he gave us some insights with regards to osteoarthritis and why obesity is a risk factor for osteoarthritis, and talked about osteoarthritis as a metabolic disorder, which was incredible. And then also detailed the ways in which we could address joint pain and dysfunction non-surgically. So using more regenerative medicine techniques. So yeah, it was a brilliant night. We also had Chef Ben Horn, former executive chef of Icebergs, who the food was insane. It was amazing. And it was basically, I gave him all of the basic parameters that people have to abide by when they're on phase one of the simpler health protocol. And I said, make it taste incredible. And he, yeah, he did a phenomenal job. Yeah, everyone loved it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And yeah, it was good to actually meet Dr. Boundy as well, because, he put the stem cells in my brother's knees a few months ago, which is going fantastic as far as I know. Last I heard, he's still working and I'm not getting abusive phone calls telling me to fix his knees because he can't work and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm in front. It's been a win-win.
Yeah, speaking of jealousy, because we sorted your knees out back in 2015, and your brother's been bitching about what about my knees ever since.
Finally got those sorted. So, what was interesting though,
Yeah, it was interesting.
sorry,
No, you go.
what was interesting about the evening, and as great as all the speakers were and everything, what popped up for me a couple of times was what we've spoken about a lot in recent times is about all the stuff you see on social media from all these experts in whatever field they're in or claim to be in or etc. And the really broad brushstrokes that they tend to speak about with in terms of the health matter they're talking about, but not so much with that with our speakers, but just the human element of the views that they have in the technology or the science that they speak of is still trapped up inside of a certain view they have in to start with. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
You know,
kind of. I get it.
when we speak all the time about what we see on social media and stuff, and it's not necessarily that they're talking crap, but it's still tied up within the view their beliefs anyway, versus the actual science itself, without any context, without any distinguishing some things that are different within different contexts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was having oh gosh, so many amazing conversations I've been having of late, but one the other day talking about the phenomenon epistemology. And there's really an in-depth assessment of, well, where does that knowledge come from? And how do they know? And in what context? And is it relevant today? Maybe it was relevant previously. And is that just agreement reality? Like just it seems really real because everyone seems to agree on it and they just take it for granted. And there's that assumed baseline of which you then build new knowledge, but that base foundation isn't necessarily true and real. So there's got to be, I think, an ability to question sacred cows, beliefs, question, well, not necessarily from a cynical perspective, but with a real healthy dose of skepticism. You know, that skepticism really ought to drive one to dig deeper and find out what's really going on. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. I was just on in a conversation just a moment ago on a Zoom call with some panelists that I'll be sharing the stage with next week at an event in Sydney at the ICC called CapTech 2024. And these panelists were talking about health innovation and investment opportunities for health tech in the future, et cetera, something like that. But, you know, there's a doctor on the panel. There's a very experienced board member who I think he was the former chair of Ramsay's Healthcare or something, but and then a politician who was the Minister of Aged Care. And so, yeah, look, there's going to be fascinating conversations, but everyone comes from, as do I, our own point of view. Everyone's got their own agenda, but the skill is listening responsibly for, okay, where is that conversation coming from? Where are they speaking from? What's their intention? Even when people complain, you know, what's the commitment behind that complaint? You know, if there was no commitment for something, often, you know, you just wouldn't complain. You would just shut up. But if you can hear what people are truly committed to and interact and speak from that perspective, then I think you get a more true and real conversation. Most of the time, people are just about their own self-importance and how to make a buck, or they're trying to figure out, you know, what they can get away with and how best to cover their ass.
Yeah.
Uh, that too, you know, you got to relate to that with a degree of compassion, and that's just part of the fabric of being a human being. Unfortunately, you can't invalidate it too much, but yeah, it is annoying.
It just makes it hard for people to know what the hell to do and who to trust and who to believe. And even within that, they listen to what whoever validates the way they want to do things and the way they believe in the first place anyway. On that note,
That's right.
um, brings up another topic for me, just thinking about that, and that is the difference between what we do at Simpler Health in far as restoring metabolic health and as a consequence or a performance measure losing weight versus just restricting calories in general. And there's so much traction, like I'm saying, within that view, and that's how people want to look at it and believe and take on that that's the case. Within just restricting calories. And I just see there's just so much to learn and take on that fulfills on the ability to sustain a health set point. The more you get invested in those intricacies of getting healthy and restoring health versus just cutting calories and eating what I like now and again. I've found that like massively beneficial in staying the path, so to speak, the more I can be vested. And I think that's what's great about what we do with clients is really educate them in what we're doing, how and why, to best support them long term versus just eating less. Because I see that so many times on, you know, some pretty cool people and funny as hell on the internet and stuff, but it's just not what we're doing at Simpler Health. So anyway,
Yeah. it's not to invalidate
No.
those strategies as well. I think for many people, and the results, there's oh gosh, I can't even remember their names, but they're hilarious. I love their clips. There's one guy that calls everyone cunnies, and
Adam,
it's brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
base training or whatever.
Yeah. No, they're great. And clearly, they've been able to um, make a real difference to a good number of people. And and then there are those that it doesn't make a difference to or will never engage that. So we get a lot of people who have tried everything and then they come to us,
Yeah.
right? So these are people who are very insulin resistant. So it's when you're in an insulin resistant state, the approach to restoring health and vitality is very different. Also, we get people who tend to be older. I'm not saying that we can't help everyone, but the majority of people that come our way tend to be, sort of mid, late 40s. They're approaching 50, generally speaking. And it's like, okay, I've got to handle this now. And they're insulin resistant.
Already.
Sorry, say that.
You're at the age again where they've tried 10 things already and then it's not working anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And the commitment isn't necessarily to, uh, impress a future mate, with a six pack and bigger delts. And, I just want to get buff and, the sort of younger man phenomenon. And no, we get people who are dealing now with the inevitabilities of aging and post-reproductive years. What people need to really, really, really understand is you're not supposed to be well.
Mhm.
It's not the right way to be. It's not like it's wrong if you're not 100% healthy. No, that's the universe. That's entropy. Everything starts to break down. There's a utility to you, and the utility is to reproduce. Uh, and, as a human being, it goes beyond just reproduction. Like in the animal kingdom, it's, what can you contribute beyond that, even if you don't have kids or a family, right? So there's a productivity and service commitment as well. And when you're getting older and your ailments start to inhibit your capacity to be able to deliver on what you're committed to, then we're the guys that people reach out to. And we take those health constraints, which are a barrier, out of the way and free people up to be able to pursue what that really matters to them, whether it be more available for their family, both physically and cognitively. People aren't present. They're tired, there's brain fog, they're irritable, and they're angry and upset, really upset. And if we can help empower them to be present with those that they care about, I mean, that's transformational. That alters the quality of someone's life. If we can take some of the aches and pains away and get people more mobile and more with more energy to participate in certain areas of their life, we see people just take off. They start presenting themselves on stages that they never thought possible for them. And then, obviously, most people are freaking fat and unwell. And I don't have whatever, they're an eyesore to themselves. They hate themselves. And I don't like that people have that internal dialogue about themselves. I don't like that people are having heart attacks and getting diagnosed with late stage chronic diseases and then, increased mortality and morbidity. And, it's just not a great way. It doesn't have to be that way. And I've lost too many people in my life to not do something about that. So, if we can contribute to people's aliveness and capacity to participate in life the way that they really want, then that's who Simpler Health is.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few people that come to mind when you just said that. I mean, about what you were saying about the coaching. There's a newish sort of a client that I'm coaching at the moment, and she was just um, adamant that she knows who she is, she knows what she's like to do, and she's going to fail on this again. And like, how's she not going to do it this time? And she's just been awesome. She's just been messaging me whenever there's a thought or a craving or a this or a that, and then gets to the end of the day and sends me the food diary and then accompanying the food diary says, I didn't cave. This is the first time I've been able to do this, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, that is awesome. And then there's also people like, a good friend of ours, cousin, who's just not that old and he's on dialysis 3 times a week. That's just, oh, can't imagine what that would be like personally, let alone for the family and the impacts on everyone else around him. Because I know, the guy I'm talking about, it impacts his life as well, as far as how often he can work, when he has to work, when he has to cover for him, when his cousin can't work, when he's, all those types of things. It's a massive punish. So it's, I remember saying that to someone that inquired recently, and I said, look, you can keep mucking about with this, but what I don't want to see is like you, one of my mate's cousins on dialysis 3 times a week. And that's not going to end well, dude. Best you get it freaking handled now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. Most people on dialysis, it's because of their diabetes,
Mm.
and their diabetes is because of their um, metabolic derangement, and which is because they just didn't eat properly.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not an indictment on them. No one taught them, no one stood for them. And even if they knew, it's like you need someone like yourself. And, kudos to you. And I know what it takes to be a coach. And it's not like everyone that you're coaching communicates with that level of enthusiasm and acknowledgement and gratitude. So, I really acknowledge you for sticking it out and continuing to make yourself available for people like that. And it takes everything on your part. And, I get and also appreciate the discipline with which you bring to managing your own health and well-being. And you have to, otherwise you can't be available for those that you're committed to impacting and making a difference to. So, kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yes.
Yeah,
What have you been up to lately?
not much.
That's why I asked. I just wanted to highlight that you just sit around lunch these days, do
I just like, yeah, like, no, I'm like this.
nothing.
Oh gosh, I was just thinking about managing, like, you have projects, right? There are certain intentions. You invent an intention. It's like, okay, what could I give myself to? And to fulfill an intention, you invent a project. And the project is the vehicle with which you can fulfill that intention and have specific outcomes be realized. And I was kind of thinking about the different projects that I've got at play at the moment. It's like 7 major ones, right? 4 of them here in Australia. There's the Simpler Health Metabolic Program. I mean, that's really, these days, maybe 10% of what I do, but it's, 90% of who I am. And thankfully yourself and Trevor and Emily and Steve, and, I've got a small team of dedicated human beings willing to give themselves to this endeavor. And you guys kind of, run that ship. And then there's the Wine Doctor, and the Wine Doctor was a huge hit at the event last week. I thought I'd bring a few bottles.
If everyone was just interested in the wine and the continual G at the end, it was just
Yeah, lifestyle products.
in what they are. Like I'm saying before, they hear it and through what they want. Oh, wine that's actually good for me to drink. That sounds like me.
But then they get to have conversations, and you bring distinctions to that phenomena. So you've got a very subjective phenomena like wine, and people are like, yeah, I like wine. I mean, that's probably the extent of it for most people, right?
Most
I like wine, give me more.
of the people.
But then when you talk about the Mediterranean diet, and places like Sardinia, and regular consumption of red wine in particular is an important part of those diets. And why, and what is it about wine that contributes to potential health benefits? And then what's distinct about the Wine Doctor wine? And how come this is unlike anything else on the planet? And then it still has alcohol. So the alcohol makes those anti-aging properties of the wine more bioavailable. But then if you drink too much, then the alcohol becomes detrimental. So how do you mitigate that? And then there are, Sophie Hood,
Yeah.
who recently won Food Stars with Gordon Ramsay and Janine Ellis, and she has this product called Soul Tonic, which utilizes a similar proprietary technology as the Wine Doctor to elevate the antioxidant content derived from Korean pears. And Korean pear juice is known and used amongst the Koreans to help mitigate the potential side effects, hangover side effects after alcohol consumption. Now, what's the scientific evidence for that? I think it's limited, but the studies haven't been done. It's difficult to get ethics approval to do
Yeah.
those types of studies, but people use it and it can do no harm. So I think the best way is to consume the Soul Tonic before the Wine Doctor wine is the best alcoholic beverage if you're going to drink. And then you said Continual G. So Continual G is a supplement that was introduced to me by a couple of good friends, Pat Cash and also Professor Joseph Maroon. And Joe Maroon is a famous neurosurgeon and neuroscientist. And he likes Continual G because it's the only supplement on the market that can increase intracellular levels of our master antioxidant called glutathione. And they've demonstrated that if you can take this supplement orally, you take your white blood cells, your immune cells, and it actually significantly increases the intracellular content of glutathione. Now, that's important, especially if it has the capacity to increase glutathione in the hippocampus and other brain regions, because it can help to stave off the potential deleterious effects of dementia as our brains start to deteriorate. So that's Joe's interest. And I just thought, wow, what a brilliant supplement. So Simpler Health has partnered Continual G, and we've introduced that into our protocol to better assist health and vitality outcomes for our clients. So yeah, I think as a detoxing support mechanism, the Continual G is fantastic before and after consuming alcohol. So regular consumption of minimal amounts of the Wine Doctor wine, and you can potentially mitigate the hangover effects and any deleterious impact of the alcohol with those other products, Soul Tonic and Continual G. But it's lifestyle, and everyone, the cancer societies and whoever else can say there's no safe limit of alcohol. Okay, what's the world going to do with that insight now? And it's not even true. There's a lot of scientific evidence that says microdosing with alcohol from middle age onwards can have enormous benefits in terms of vascular health and staving off the effects of dementia. So, those statements aren't necessarily true, and it's nuanced, and people have to learn how it's nuanced and how do you be responsible for those contextual details.
That's what I was talking about earlier with that. I mean, that's a great example of it. And also with the latest thing that's getting around now about the protein intake. There's been a study done which just shows you can eat 100 grams of protein in a sitting and you'll utilize the whole thing. And now that's becoming the blanket statement for everyone that talks about protein online, is that no, there was a study done. It's upended the thousands of other studies. Yeah, I might wait till the second one comes through on that. And as you're saying, get a bit interested in the details of it as to what type of protein, who was taking the protein. Were they a trained individual taking X amount of protein already, or were they a sedentary overweight person that's just started training and using protein? It's nothing spoken about like that. It's all just, no, you can eat 100 grams of protein now and your body will utilize it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you gotta have some generalities, but yeah, to your point, that they are quite blanket. And you've got very influential doctors online saying the most, it's calories, it's protein, and are you metabolically well? Well, okay, like what you're saying, like how much protein, how frequently during the day, what source of protein, in what context are you consuming the protein? I mean, you could eat the adequate amount of protein that the science is saying that you ought to eat. But if you're drinking 2 liters of Coca-Cola every day, along with that, or the protein content is in the form of KFC, and it's deep fried, and
Doesn't
you know
matter.
what I mean?
Protein.
You just got to get the protein in.
Doesn't-
Yes, you need protein. And then there's it's all about muscle mass.
Mm.
And well, okay, true to a large degree, but then talk to me about the number of years lost due to the poor diet amongst the South Pacific Islanders, where 30, 40, whatever, probably 50% these days are type 2 diabetic. They got more muscle mass than anyone else. I went to Fiji. I went to Fiji's for a friend's wedding, and I'm flying back, and there's all these Fijians on the plane, and they're the most beautiful, accommodating human beings, and they're massive, and they're all squished like
Yes.
this, and they just make it work, and no one complains.
Yeah.
And they're just really big human beings, and they've got an enormous uh, amount of muscle mass, but it doesn't help them. I mean, their total life expectancy is dramatically less than ours,
Mm.
and they've got a much higher rate of type 2 diabetes. And, the answer is not, it's not a freaking Ozempic deficiency. That's not the problem. And everyone's like, oh, Ozempic's going to fix everything. I mean, one of our scientific advisors at Simpler Health, Dr. Antonio Chibutaris, he was the scientific director for obesity globally for Novo Nordisk when they were developing these drugs. Recently he rings me up and he goes, "Oh man, I've just let myself go." He lost 14 kilograms using the Simpler Health protocol. He's the guy that developed the drugs, right? And I'm not using that shit.
Yeah, wow.
This is, yeah, and it's faster. He said using the Simpler Health protocol, it's more healthy and it's faster.
Hmm.
And so he dropped 14 kg. He looks amazing
Yeah.
right now. He's in his he's like your age, early 50s, I think, or
Yeah.
something like that, and maybe 50. And he's got a six-pack now, and he looks awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So it's it's interesting, the whole conversation about what we were saying is about how much protein, what. So and there's another thing as well. The context about protein, everyone goes, oh, you need X amount of protein to increase muscle mass, and you need to be in a calorie surplus to do it. And it's no, you don't. And it was a great talk I saw. I can't remember the guy's name that it was, talking about protein with oh, what's her name? Rachel? No. Who's the
Rhonda?
Rhonda? He was talking with her about protein intake and saying, look, it makes perfect sense how your body is just an adaptation machine. And if
Yes.
you start pumping it with 3 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, it'll get used to running on 3 grams per kilo of body weight. It'll be wasteful about it and use what it needs anyway, and etc. But if you dial that back to the minimum required, then it'll get way more efficient at doing that. And you'll still, if the demand is there for it, you'll still build the freaking muscle. It's not just going to go, sorry, not getting enough protein.
Yeah, but in a healthful state.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to understand, okay, well, what's the mechanism with which we can absorb and assimilate that protein and utilize it to advance protein synthesis response in our muscles, right? So in a healthful state, yes, but most people aren't healthy.
Yeah.
So you got to understand, well, what in my current diet and state of health, what mechanisms along that pathway are compromised
Mm.
where it wouldn't support, it's not just so straightforward. It's multifactorial.
Yeah.
And You have to look at it like that. And that's what you can't see it when it's all about you. You're busy looking after your family and paying bills and looking after your household and so forth. You need a coach to assist you in managing all aspects of your physiology because you haven't got the time to learn all of this stuff either. You need just a source that you can from and not your sole source, but you can learn elsewhere and then bring it to that coaching conversation and then further advance your knowledge and bring more and more distinctions to what you're dealing with. Because wherever you have a loss of power in life, there's something going on that you can't see. And to bring something from your blind spot into the foreground, that's what a coach makes possible. And so, when someone's on this journey, like if you're doing the Simpler Health Protocol, for example, and I said this last week at the event, um, there's only 3 reasons why you wouldn't lose weight on our protocol in any given week. It ought to be pretty linear. And those 3 reasons are you're menstruating and you're retaining fluid. Now, if you're a male, that ain't you, right? As much as I'm sure there are a lot of people that might argue against me these days on that point. But, so that's one. And then, or you're constipated and you need to defecate. So you're retaining mass and weight from that. And the third one is you've deviated from the protocol, either intentionally or unintentionally. Now, if it's unintentionally, there's something missing in your understanding and education. So that the coach is there to educate you on the science, to bring distinctions to it. So you go, oh, I didn't know, I didn't get that. And okay, now I'll correct it. And or if you're deviating intentionally, then there's something that needs to transform. And the coach is there to assist that ontological transformation. It's a process of growing up. It's a process of developing the discipline and integrity over time within a committed structure. No one's got the integrity and discipline to begin with, right? Clearly. But within the structure, that gets developed such that you reach a point where not only have you produced the outcomes, but you can trust yourself again. And that's, you in particular, more than anyone ever, right, has you develop the discipline and you're militant about it with yourself. And that's what enables you to be freed up to support other people, is the discipline and the rigor with which you bring to you the management of your own health and well-being. Right. So that's what you set the gold standard, and it's great that we have that gold standard because against which, people can kind of measure themselves against and be empowered to aspire towards. And then we don't let them fail so long as they promise just not to quit. Just don't leave and you'll get the results. We'll always get the results with you. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Other than that, so the wine doctor, the metabolic stuff, I consulting, I still do biotech consulting. And then overseas, I've got a couple of projects in Indonesia where we're forging ahead and causing a quantum leap in the field of regenerative medicine. And then also in terms of medical technology and manufacturing, I've got a project going on in India as well. So all of this just takes all of my time when I'm not on daddy duty, looking after, my daughter.
Yeah, how big's she getting now? My God.
I know.
I saw her, speaking of people that have taken off and whatever since doing the Simpler Health and everything else. I played with Natalie last week. Ange and I did.
You gigged with Natalie.
Yeah, doing her original stuff.
Musician. Just for people who don't know Natalie or that you're a musician, when you say I played with Natalie.
Yeah. Just me and you talking. We're just
I know.
yeah. So she was doing her original stuff, and just seeing her dressed up and dancing and doing that whole show on original, like none of that was possible before. Even all the original songs and the how much did she lose on the protocol? 40s.
Oh gosh. She came to me, I think she was 102, and the clinical team had told her she needed to settle at that weight. And now I think she hovers somewhere around 70.
She had lap
So
band surgery or something, didn't she?
she did, yeah. And she lost weight from that and then gained it back, which is often the case. And then, yeah, the medical team are just, they resigned her to you just have to be happy with where you're at.
Yeah.
And thankfully she knew you and you sent her to me and she dropped the weight. I mean, she's just done amazing. It's incredible.
She was single for the whole time I knew her from 2001, maybe 2001, somewhere around there till now. And, she did the simple health protocol. She's had a baby who, that's what brought her up, was because when I thought about how Winter had grown, I saw her daughter and just went, my God, you were like tiny the last time I saw you. Um, got married in the US and then launched a solo career where she's winning awards overseas and doing film clips and all that sort of stuff, and is now, after the band gig we did with her the other night, it's gone, oh, that's it, I need a band to play with me now, this is way better. So anything she does overseas and wherever else around here now, she wants us all to go and play with her. So it's
That's
and
great.
she actually acknowledged a bit of that on stage the other night, which was good.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's the
Yeah, she said, I've known Trevor for this long, and Ange put me on to. I rang this guy because they said that's the guy to talk to, and blah blah blah. And typical Ange goes, yeah, and she's never forgiven me yet for that.
Yeah, well, life takes off. But there's the clinical biometrics that we're concerned for, the clinical outcomes. Obviously, don't die, right? And not just don't die, but live the best productive, most alive presence that you can. And then what the client's interested in is their performance. They
Mm.
want to be able to perform, and they want to perform with vitality and have a sense of grace about them. And then also their presentation. And they want to be able to present themselves. It's not superficial. There's a confidence that comes with that, and a purpose as well. And then there's this surprising outcome of peace of mind.
Yeah,
When you've got a new future that you can now live into, one where there isn't the worry of, how am I going to look after those that I care about, or have I missed the boat in expressing myself the way that I want? And so yeah, there's an ease that comes about with that. So that's what we want for people at Simpler Health.
exactly. So yeah, that was some really interesting stuff on the lives of or the life of Natalie anyway, and some of the things people get up to once they've finished the protocol. It's really interesting and exciting, and keeps you up for the game, seeing the people that are currently in the protocol and what they take on. Um, what they fall off the wagon at as well, but pick themselves up and dust themselves off and jump back in. And then there's other people that are just like the one I spoke about before, that's just amazed at herself so far because who she knew herself to be just wasn't going to follow it. And I'll just end up quitting anyway, but I'll give it a shot. And
Yeah.
she's been outstanding. There's some other people that I'm coaching as well who are just are going great guns. Denise, one of them that's done the protocol previously, and it's funny when we see a couple of the people that were at the event the other night, and they were talking to other current clients and stuff, and we'd sort of wander over and just go, "Yeah, what's going to work this time is just completing the bloody protocol instead of bailing halfway through." Now you can see why you need to finish the protocol. But
Yeah, and so this speaks to the lazy thinking that you were pointing at earlier. And lazy thinking shows up in the form of generalities when people speak in generalities. So even if you devolve the power and possibility of the Simpler Health Protocol to, I don't know, protein and green veg,
yeah,
Oh, you just I know what to do now, right? You won't do it. You knew a whole bunch of stuff previously. You didn't do it. So if you devolve things right down and you don't include every detail, this is designed, every detail has an important aspect to it, then you get cocky and arrogant and lazy, and that lazy thinking shows up over time in how your body kind of manifests itself. So, yeah, there are people who have worked with us in the past, but didn't complete the full, didn't honor on all six promises. So, all six promises are eat what we tell you to eat, don't eat what we tell you not to eat, write down everything that you eat, be coachable, share with people around you what you're doing and why, right? And the opportunity of this, and complete the journey in its entirety. If you don't fulfill on all six promises, not only are you a smaller person in being because you lack integrity, you just don't have the power to continue it, forevermore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's absolutely critical.
It's one of the funny things you hear people say that do pull the pin on it is like, I don't plan on putting the weight back on anytime soon. When I was 24 kilos overweight, I couldn't remember at the start of that going, you know what? Sod this, I'm going to put 24 kilos. It was never the intention. Who does that?
No, no. No, no one does. Yeah. And
They just,
we'll,
once they're back out on their own, they haven't dealt with themselves in that structure. In how do I sustain this health set point long term in freedom of choice?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So
And
I
at
love,
some
yeah.
point, they just they keep they fight with it for a while, and I'm going to get this back on track, and I do. Oh crap! Look at me! I've gone back to as heavy as I was beforehand. All right, then I'll come back and do it properly.
Yeah. And it's not even an indictment on the individual. It's the nature of the condition in which we live, the environments that we live. It's always going to pull for, like I said earlier, that entropy and things. You're gonna head towards metabolic dysfunction again, unless you bring a rigor and you're vigilant about how you manage yourself long term. And it was interesting hearing from Siba Dole. It was really great to hear him say this, and he put these sort of pictures of food groups up that are abundant in the standard Australian diet, right? The typical Western diet, a lot of junk food, a lot of fried food, and a lot of general understanding that it's okay, they're kids, they
Oh,
can get away with eating this. And it was brilliant to hear him say it's never okay. And the way he framed it is your gut microbiome, you have this microbial flora in your gut, and that's your family. That's your first family. So when you eat, what you're feeding first is not you, it's those microbes. Now, people could argue, no, but it hits my tongue first. And there's a sensory appreciation cognitively from my tongue to my brain. Well, you'll be surprised how much of that want and appreciation of the food that you eat is actually driven via your gut microbiome, both through its influence on your nervous system via nerves in your gut to chemicals that they release that then influence, your central nervous system systemically. So it's unbelievable. And my gut microbiome have been around with me for a long time. So the bacterium develop a signature specific to me. So I could put my gut microbiome into you and it would have an effect and vice versa. So in short-term studies, we see this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best or appropriate microbiome for each other, right? We see this with stem cells, for example. You could take your stem cells and put them into me, and I won't die. I may not elicit much of an immunological response to them at all. If we keep dosing me with your stem cells, then maybe I will develop an immunological response. in the laboratory, what we understand is these cells occur immunoprivileged. So they look like they're not going to generate an immunological response in a recipient,
Right.
right? But what happens when you do integrate them into a recipient, those cells, the cell surface markers alter in vivo. And then there's the potential to elicit an immunological response. Similarly with our gut microbiome. So you've got the gut microbiome that you've screwed with it, you've taken antibiotics, you've eaten junk food, haven't looked after it, but it's not to say that it can't be restored to a more healthful state. And that's what needs to be kept in mind. So you got the bugs that you're feeding, you've got your metabolic system that you have to be responsible for, and then the impact on our brain and the way our brain's wired, the neuroinflammation as well, and then your immune system. And so your access to altering your metabolic state is nutrition. Your access to modulating your gut microbiome is nutrition. Your access to impacting your immune system is nutrition and your gut microbiome, which is influenced by nutrition. And then if you're experiencing lethargy, brain fog, inability to make decisions, you're just not on point, you're cognitively impaired in any way, shape, or form, you're losing your memory, etc. Well, how do you access your nervous system? Well, it's via modulating your metabolic system, your gut microbiome, the neuroinflammation, and movement.
Mm.
So how you impact your brain is by moving your body. And so, for example, it's not just about total muscle mass that we were referring to earlier, like the South Pacific Islanders. You have to activate the muscles.
Yeah.
So it's upon exertion that your muscles release what we call myokines. So these are cytokines released from your muscle that can influence your brain health. And so your access to modulating brain function and health is by moving your body and activating, exerting your muscles. It's not just a matter of preserving muscle mass and having a lot of muscle. You have to appropriately activate it.
Mm. Speaking of a lot of muscle, that was something I was going to ask you. Something that's completely, I mean, I've stood on the scales 1,000 times and never really took much notice of it before. But in the conversation that keeps coming up about got to have more muscle, got to have more muscle, got to have more muscle. On the body composition scales, for example, there's a reading there for muscle mass in kilograms. But then there's also a reading for muscle quality.
Yes.
What's that and what's the difference?
Oh gosh, it depends. So on the Tanita scales, for example, yeah, the muscle quality, I would assert, and I'd have to check in on this, but I would assert that that would be in relationship to um, uh, there would be a correlation to strength and the amount of adipose or fatty tissue in and amongst the muscle.
Oh,
I how it measures it on the Tanita, I don't know.
yeah,
Let me look into that.
yeah.
Muscle quality. I do, yeah, you know what? I do know because we've got the same, have we got the same units?
Yeah, the one you stand on with the handheld. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I see them on client scales as well that send me their
right.
weights every week and whatever. I send them
Yeah,
quality. And when I look at those things in terms of, oh, you've got to have more muscle, more muscle. And then I remember asking myself, well, to a point, yes, but what if you just maintained the amount of muscle you had so that you didn't lose any, but your muscle quality improved? Would that be the same, better, worse, or what's the go with that versus just for because no, you see all the time, well, you've got to keep challenging yourself and upping the weight and doing more reps and to build more muscle and for how long, how often, and how much more muscle? You can't just keep doing that for the rest of your life. Otherwise, I'd be lifting 500 kilo weights by now. I've been lifting weights since I was in high school. I'd be doing 500 kilo curls if I could just constantly increase weight and reps. It's ridiculous. It's only so far
yeah,
you can go with doing that.
yeah. So these scales like the Tanita scales, they extrapolate from data that they've collected. Now, if you just look it up, muscle quality score indicating the condition or quality of muscle, which changes according to factors like age and exercise level. So quality of what would that would assert is that the quality of muscle, even with the same total mass, decreases as we age and also improves with exercise or decreases with lack of exercise. So what does the quality equate to? I don't know. They don't put the details in here, but I would assert that it would point to some of the things that I mentioned earlier, the ability of the muscle to hypertrophy in response to exertion or stress. So when you stress the muscle, then you're basically, as an adaptive response, it would grow, but it would only grow so long as there's sufficient nutrition to support the investment in new protein synthesis. So there has to be an adequate supply of protein throughout the day, ideally. But certainly the body does an accounting of, mostly leucine. I say leucine does an accounting of that amino acid. It doesn't do an accounting of all the 20 amino acids, just the one. And if there's a sufficient amount of that, then it goes, okay, there's enough protein available. Let's invest in protein synthesis. And it adapts by building more muscle, right? Now, what also assists that when you're younger is a very different hormonal profile. So if you've got, higher levels of testosterone, you're going to build muscle faster. There's an anabolic sort of potential that's there when you're younger that isn't available when you're older and your testosterone levels have dropped. So, so that quality of muscle, I don't know the details or the studies from which Tanita obtained that data set, but basically you get measured against whatever normal data set that they have, people in various age brackets. So I know when I look at myself, if I do some exercise and I'm eating properly, getting adequate protein, and I'm not doing anything deleterious, then yeah, the quality of my muscle I do notice it improve pretty immediately.
Yeah, right. I was just going to have a look and see because I knew what made me think of it was the surprise of the where I sat on the scale as far as how much muscle mass I had versus the muscle quality.
I think you could relate that to conditioning. I love these little video clips of this guy, Anatoly.
Oh yeah, he's great.
He's like a power lifter or something. He goes into gyms and he pretends to be a cleaner. And he doesn't look that big, and he's approaching guys who are massive, doing deadlifts of ridiculous amounts of weight. And then he just says, "Oh, excuse me." And then he just picks the bar up and moves it out of the way. And they're just blown away. So clearly he doesn't have as much muscle mass as them.
Yeah,
But from a functional perspective, whatever mass he has is optimized in its ability to lift that weight, plus all the technique and everything that he's got. So
they are great
yeah,
videos.
yeah,
I, I love seeing them.
yeah.
That's won't let me log in. Can't see it, but yeah, I remember seeing the just when you click on the readout and it says where you sit in the scale of things and whatever, and the muscle in kilograms was like normal, but the muscle quality was on the high scale, and I went,
Right. Yeah.
that's interesting.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not just about mass,
Yeah.
right? It's the conditioning of it. It's how much adipose tissue one has in that muscle as well. And then you've got your hormones. And this is why we had, a doctor talking about hormones and metabolic health as well. Clearly, that's easy to understand if you look at how easy it was to gain muscle when you were younger versus, now for us, right? So obviously hormones play a big role. And then there's the nervous system. If your nervous system, if there's neuroinflammation, then there's also compromise there in your ability to activate the muscles, that neuromuscular junction and interface, right? So
The nutritional, the other nutrition, like micronutrients and how your body utilizes protein, fats, and carbs in the output of it as well. in the exercise exertion and all that sort of thing. I think that's a part of one of the huge differences people see in how they feel on the Simple Health protocol is just their body's ability to absorb more and utilize and put into action far better nutrient uptake and utilization.
Yeah,
Or
that's actually how. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why Dr. Seba Dolai and I came to know each other. I
right.
was invited to a breakfast years ago by Professor Thomas Barodi, famous gastroenterologist, and he had heard about the outcomes that we generate with our protocol and was fascinated. And he suspected, he said, I think you're dramatically altering the gut microbiome. And that's why people's autoimmune symptoms are just disappearing and people are getting well so quickly. And then you speak to Joe Maroon, the neurosurgeon, and he says, we call it psychosurgery in the medical field, where we use low dose mood altering substances like psilocybin, and CBD and LSD, things like that, together with neuromodulatory technologies like hyperbaric oxygen or transcranial magnetic stimulation or photobiomodulation, and then combined with cognitive behavioral therapy. And he said, Dean, you're getting the same results just with nutrition and conversation, right? So from the gut to the brain, and then you've got the likes of Antonio Civitarese, who spent many years at the highest level studying the incretin system, which the GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic modulate, choosing our protocol to help deal with his own health, right? So if you're attacking metabolic health, gut health, and cognitive health from the right way as the foundation of your commitment to age healthfully, I think you're setting yourself up very powerfully, because if metabolic, gut, and cognitive or brain health is compromised, that's when you develop symptoms like weight gain, lethargy, joint pain, type 2, metabolic syndrome, gut dysbiosis, bloating, all this sort of stuff. And then people don't act on it. They think that, oh, that's just normal and that's just a normal way to live life. And
unless
they tolerate
unless they're on protocol and something happens then and they're like, is this the protocol's fault?
it. Don't get too defensive, Trevor.
I just laugh at it. It was like,
But listen, the key is they're the symptoms that people tolerate and ignore. And as I said the other night, human beings have a phenomenal capacity to tolerate unworkability. Now, leave that long enough, guess what happens? You get a diagnosis. The diagnosis is type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, dementia, cancer, or you have a stroke, right? These are the things that really damage people to the point where there's mortality and morbidity. So where there's someone's died or they're really incapacitated, how come? Oh, they had type 2 diabetes, or they had cardiovascular disease, or they had a stroke, or they had, right? Well, how come? Oh, because they ignored all of these symptoms for years. Well, how did those symptoms come about? Well, they didn't handle their metabolic, gut, and brain health.
there was something interesting Dr. Seaver said the other day at the thing. He said all these things have been happening for 10 years previous this all started. Didn't
Yes.
type 2 diabetes just didn't descend on you overnight. You didn't become pre-diabetic overnight. It's one of the things you hear people say, well, and I was the same. It's like, oh, as you get older, it's just way harder to lose weight or easier to gain weight. It's just part of getting older. And there's like a massive sliding scale of that insulin sensitivity that you're on, but way before you get to pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. Of course, it's going to be harder to lose weight.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Even you take dementia, for example. The first symptoms of dementia that are recognized before any degree of concern or diagnosis is available, the brain deterioration started 20 years earlier.
Yeah, right.
And that's why it's called type 3 diabetes. right? And people don't act on it because you still wake up the next day and you're still consumed with just whatever you need to handle to survive that day. And so it takes an enormous amount of forward thinking to invest in your health now. Just as you would invest financially in something, you want to look like what's the possible return on this investment in the future. And so you've worked your butt off to save money, and then you're giving up that money towards an investment, but you know it's an investment.
Mm,
And yes, there's a risk involved, but the upside is worth it in your risk profile. And you got to look for yourself as a human being, depending on where you're at in your life. How much are you willing to invest now when you take into consideration your risk profile? And then what's the upside? And then how do you ensure that you get a return on investment?
mm,
And you have to ensure it. You've got to be smart with that. You've got to be responsible. And if you're investing in something like if you're investing in a gym membership, if you're investing in a nutritionist or a dietitian, and you're not getting the results that you expect, well, you got to make a call on that investment.
mm,
And then you've got to pull your investment out, right? You may lose, you may have gained something, but you pull your investment out, you got to redirect it where you're going to maximize return on investment. So that's I think we do a pretty damn good job. It's not 100%, and there are some people that just are not coachable.
yeah.
I haven't seen anyone whose physiology has prevented us from being able to make a difference to them. It's more just their willingness to be coachable and stick to the structure. And, no indictment on them if they don't want to, if they don't like it, or if they just, not everyone grew up learning how to be coachable. I mean, I think most people that we deal with aren't, but they're willing to develop that within the structure.
Yeah.
So I think the majority of people that come to us, we get to make an enormous contribution to.
Yeah, sure. Lucky to do so. Because when they do rip through it and learn all those things and have those transformations along the way, there's nothing that beats that for them or for us either.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the talk. We'll be back. We'll have some more recent or current client chewing the fats coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. And we'll also be working on our next Untangling Metabolic Health event and where that's going to be and who's going to speak at it and who's coming and all that sort of thing very soon. So to keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions about this chat or any of the others, please send us a message or comment underneath the video. And thanks for your time, Dean. I know you're a flat biscuit with lots and lots and lots of things going on.
This is the important stuff. This is
It's all,
ground roots. So
all important. All right.
awesome.
Talk soon.